We're talking about bakers and how they're ensuring that they will continue to stay afloat regardless of the challenges that they are faced with, talking about the hike in the price of the baking ingredients. And NAFDAC is also asking them to adhere to global standards in terms of their products. What are your thoughts on that? Welcome to the show.
Well, I want to believe that sometimes we are experts in blackmail, and it's very easy for people to blackmail others and then probably get ahead somehow or gain advantage. You see, when they make profit, they don't come out to tell anybody. That is the issue. And business, like everybody knows, is a risk. And you do some basic investment and they are expected to make some money. But what we'll continue to speak about is our ability as a people to embrace the reality of the moment. You see, when China, at a point in their history, felt that they needed to develop, they shut down both the air, the land, and the water borders for 30 years. In other words, there was nothing that was produced from outside that could come into China for 30 years. And today, when we look at China, we just look at them as they emerge from the moon. I've said it here over and over. Necessity, they say, is the mother of invention. If there is no wheat, then we can eat our cassava. And then we will survive by it.
There is cassava bread.
Yeah, but even if it's only bread, we can eat it. We have been eating cassava without bread. But there seems to be
preference for wheat.
Yeah, you have to kill that appetite.
Where is the cassava bread?
Yeah.
At some point in time, there were the flours where there was cassava flour, and so bakeries were making use of the cassava flour for bread. But that didn't seem to last, maybe because of the consumer preference too. So there is a lot of preference for wheat bread.
Is it the preference
if there is preference for wheat bread, it becomes a luxury. And when you are purchasing a luxury good, you don't complain.
Sir.
You don't complain about pricing because it's luxury. But if you have alternative, if you go to a Yamara this morning, they won't be telling you about wheat because the flour is made here. You eat your amala. So you are fine. You eat your beans, the one we can plant in Borno State. Okay. So, but you see, the real issue here is the fact that some people want the state to fund their luxury. And the state should not fund anybody's luxury. It's not the business of the state. If people want to continue to import wheat to do bread, there's no big deal about it. It's business. Like they say in my village, you sell as you buy, and there is no trouble. So if I buy wheat and it's expensive and the price of bread become 3,000 per loaf, and people cannot afford it, you have to also be thinking. You know, the last time we were talking about some conversation, and I was saying to people, you see, the president of China, about 15 years ago, came around and called all the industry experts together and asked them a very simple question. And that question was that he has looked at the trend in history that in the 1980s, when, of course, the price of labor in Europe had gone high, and then, of course, they couldn't pay, the people have to move out their factory to Japan. And when the price of labor rose in Japan, then people moved to Malaysia, to Singapore, and to Indonesia. Now, as the prices in these places are rising, people move to China to build factories. Now, the question is, are we going to sleep and allow, as price of labor is also rising in Ghana, and allow the industry to move to Africa? That was a question. They put it on the table and they agreed and they said, look, we are not going to allow people to move. What is the real issue? Price of labor. Can we substitute labor? And they say yes. So China went into the production of humanoids and robotics en masse to replace the hands in the factory. Today, as we speak, over 65% of the work in the factory are done by humanoids. They don't get tired. They don't go on strike. They don't go on break. If there is no market, you just press the button, it stops. If there is market, you press the button, they are working. So you find that they have been able, in their own domain, able to stabilize pricing by controlling the most fundamental element in that mix, which was labor.
Okay.
And they stabilized it.
Okay,
so
sir,
we must get to that point where we will be looking at how do we solve our problem without necessarily constituting nuisance to society.
Okay, sir. Let me take you up on that. 90% of what is used in making bread is flour.
Yes.
100% of flour manufacturers is government-approved waiver. Which means if government say no wheat is coming into this country for flour, no wheat will come into this country. So don't you think it still falls to government to...
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Why is government doing all of this? It is because of the blackmail. So we emotionally blackmail the government to say, government, oh, our people are suffering. They can no longer afford the price of bread. This is a problem.
If bread can be done or made with cassava, which it did, during Obasanjo's time, if you remember, Obasanjo said no to fruit juice.
It is not the business of government
you said
to determine.
China stopped stopped importation for 30
but
years.
because they
so
were
government
socialists.
can also stop wheat from coming
No,
in.
because they were socialists.
They were what?
They are socialists. Now, of course, government own and control the economy in China. But here,
Okay.
we're capitalists. Businesses, the forces of demand and supply,
Yes.
should be able to determine how pricing is done. Now, once we take pricing out of the market and put it in government, is either we are advocating for a socialist regime or we are asking that government become the father of everybody. This is not possible in a capitalist economy which we run. What is important is that the government is losing so much in terms of revenue because we're trying to subsidize these purchases so that your people can eat bread. And then, of course, you are funding and creating jobs in Russia, in Ukraine, who are the greatest exporter of wheat.
What do you think? Empowering the DBN, having a partnership with the Organization for Environmental, Agriculture and Health Development to equip selected women with soft skills, and they also included those who are physically challenged.
I think for me it's a very welcome development, like Sam has said. Like the Chinese proverb says, you teach people how to fish and you have fed them for an entire life rather than just giving them fish to eat and you succeed in feeding them for just one day. We have to deliberately do all of this, but the real worry that I have is also our attitude to some of these initiatives. I mentioned that here yesterday also while we're talking about skill acquisition, where you buy a generator for somebody to start a small business and then you have to mortgage it to solve some personal issue. And this, of course, keep furthering the circle of poverty. This is the real worry. I also feel that we should not just be throwing money at people, thinking that, or throwing even equipment or investment on people, thinking that they naturally can do something. I feel the way it should go is that society must find a way to first and foremost train people on what, of course, exactly they want to invest in, even if it's going to be farming. We have to train them on the new skill of doing farming. And then apart from doing farming, because this is also supposed to be a kind of an investment to help them create some economy. And then also help them to understand how to keep books, which is quite important. You know, I was speaking to a friend of mine in Kano the other day. He said he had a friend. He ventured into this agri stuff. And did some farm and make some money from the animal, sold all the animal and went bought a jeep, now looking for money to continue the farming. Now this is a very big problem. And I think that financial literacy need also to be incorporated in some of all this initiative. That before you really give them this thing, first of all, train them, empower them, whether technically or financially, administratively, and they be able to differentiate between capital and profit. And then how to even use and implement profit should be taught. Because if this is flourishing, what that will do is that it also adds to the revenue profile of the states. Because these people, if they are making some profit, they could actually pay some cash, some tax to government, which also government can also use to provide basic infrastructure that will facilitate trade and investment within the states.
All right, let's move away from Nigeria and even Africa to India, where the country is preparing to launch a bidding process for a significant 80 billion rupee, 96, which is $960 million incentive program to boost the production of electric vehicle batteries. That's the way the world is going. Electric cars. So India right now is having a bidding process for $960 million incentive program to boost the production of electric vehicle batteries. The program will require winning bidders to establish advanced chemistry battery plants with a combined output capacity of 20 gigawatt hours, just as the government plans to solicit bids from potential investors in the near future. So this is aligning with the country's long-term goals of promoting sustainable transportation and reducing carbon emissions. We talked about something like this, I think that should be yesterday, where there should be plan towards the future. I think you were talking about what is the country doing in preparation for the future. Now this is a path that the world is taking, moving away from fossil fuel, and that's why we're having electric cars. And so in readiness for that future, which would mean that almost every vehicle will be an electric car, India wants to have production, or wants to go into production of electric car batteries. What do you think?
Yeah, like they say, success is always preparation means meeting with opportunities. And so once the opportunity put themselves on the ground, some people are there and they are ready to take advantage of it. And I think this is targeted kind of development that India is embarking on, which of course for me is also very commendable. That we are not going to, they are not going to be waiting to follow the bandwagon effect that almost everybody is there and there is no value that is left in there. Is of course is what we cannot run away from. At the end of the month, the COP28 meeting is also going on in Dubai as the world gather again to talk about how to reduce the carbon footprint on Earth. And this is vital and this is important to every nation, and see how do we reduce our carbon footprint. One of the things that is also not very clear to a lot of people, especially us, is that of course there's also a credit system within the reduction of carbon emission system, that nations can actually sell their credits. Based on the level of reduction you have done, you earn some credit that you can sell to other people and actually encash it. Of course, you see, these are what nations are all working around to see how to earn this credit by taking deliberate steps toward moving away from the depletion of non-renewable sources, so that we can become solely dependent on renewable source. Because here, what is at the fore is the human life, which is critical. Because you see, civilization has destroyed the entire ecosystem. And so when there is so much of carbon that we give out as human beings, and then of course you don't have so much wood to receive that carbon, they come back to us as human. and then become threats to our health. And that's why you see what people are doing is to see how do we remove from humanity even the natural cause for generating carbon, so that we are not endangering the entirety of life.
Looking at off-grid clean energy, how possible will it be? Whatever kind of clean energy or whatever kind of off-grid solution we will be looking at, how feasible does it look for Nigeria to have that?
I think it's fixable. What is the real issue is the ability to be able to, number one, negotiate good deals and pull the price of this clean energy, especially like solar energy or wind energy, at par with conventional energy. This has been achieved in other places. Today, the pricing for both solar and conventional energy in the UAE is the same. And so there's a preference to move naturally towards solar because they have achieved it. And this is because in terms of negotiation, the country is able to strategically engage with people who produce this, because the real issue here is the panel, because we have the sunlight. Is the panel actually that is the cost. And so it makes it quite exorbitant for an average person to be able to have it. But this leverage can be done. And even the beautiful news for us today is actually the National Agency for Science and Engineering and Infrastructure, NASENI, has been able actually to assemble panels locally that are made in Nigeria, with over 80 to 90% of the raw materials locally sourced. So that is advantageous to us. Now, how to now duplicate this or replicate it for mass production is what we really need to do some investment in. And of course, this is business. And people should be ready to put money out there and see how people can connect with it and invest in it. This is what our country will need to do. If you go to the UAE, just this week, they are floating an IPO for their taxes. About 24% of the current value is going to be sold to the public. And then they buy this IPO. And this enables RTA to bring in brand new vehicles into UAE that people will drive, and you will feel the comfort. And then, of course, as they are driving, they are making some money, and investors are also getting their return. I think that government must deliberately invest in some sectors through public offers, not necessarily having to borrow to do it. I used the Etisalat before in the UAE. It was floated just to help the teachers in the UAE. And what government did was to buy this stock on behalf of the teachers and take the money out of their salary bit by bit until they completely own it. And today is an additional source of income to the teachers. While they are still receiving their salary, at the end of the year, dividend is coming to them. And I think we must just be strategic in the way we do things here. If you float this as a bond, a lot of people will key into it, especially if you know that there are competent people to manage these things for profitability. And don't run it like as if it is the normal national cake, and do it like business and without government interference in it. Now, if we are able to do some of all these things, and then of course there is governance around it, we will be able to achieve so much as a people.
Sir, let me take us a few steps back, then we'll head forward. Sir, for us in Nigeria, for us blessed in Nigeria, we know we have an issue with government policy on power distribution and power generation. No matter who generates, you can't distribute. There are specific entities that distribute. And we also know that directly, the GDP of any nation is directly proportional to the amount of power they generate and distribute. Sir, now we have people in local places or small communities that cannot on their own afford the full assembling of a solar system. But we also know that there are companies that can service small communities, a village, half of a town, quarter of a town, but they can't do that because they can't distribute. What way can we say, okay, government, can we open up this particular avenue? Let this community or this village or this particular locality be able to serve these people, generate small, distribute small.
We have actually gone beyond there because this current government, when they came in, one of the things that they actually do was to actually break that monopoly in terms of who generates, who transmit, who distributes. Yeah, of course, few licenses were also allowed for people who want to distribute power. And of course, the president said the states actually could go ahead and generate their power and distribute it so that we don't need necessarily to be relying on the national grid. So that monopoly, as it were today, is already broken. Now, to what extent will people be able to get into this mix is what the real problem is. You see, when you look at our problem, it's so complex that sometimes you find you lack words to actually describe it. We're speaking now, we're talking about no electricity. We're actually generating up to about 7,000 kilowatts of electricity.
But we can't distribute all.
Now, and we are losing 50% of it.
Exactly.
Because
Now, transmission. Now, not just transmission, there's also the leakages, which is also happening as a result of, call it, sharp practices here and there. So there are natural leakages, there are also man-made leakages. Now, at the end of the day, you actually are losing 50% of what you're generating. So what gets distributed is supposed to be 3.5 kVA. Now, out of that 3.5, even Disco can't take it to even distribute. And so what you see happens is that, you see, this is why the national metering policy has not worked. Because what Disco do in my village, they take the light for 28 days and they bring it for 2 days and then come to collect NEPA bill at the end of the month.
For 30 days.
Oh yes, for 30 days, yes, for 1 month. So this is a problem. And now if you're having this free money, because you have refused to give meter to the villagers, and you are billing them on estimates, you're actually making so much money. So you frustrate the process of metering, so that we cannot actually determine what is consumed or what is wasted. So this is the dilemma we are as a people. And I think until we're able to actually deal with these issues of greed that comes from what human beings are doing, we will not go anywhere. What does it really take to meter? Is to ask the person who is able to buy a pole and buy wire and to connect light to his own house. What will be the difficulty of that person buying a meter to measure the amount of current he consumes?
Okay, so let me bring us back to the future. I took us to the past. So, sir, please let's look at this. The government agency now is on paper, not just on paper, that they can produce solar panels. What stops them from getting a patent or selling it. Let companies come in, because there's one other company here in Lagos that is also doing the same thing, but I don't know to the extent at which they are.
They're already commercialized. They're already selling. I have that on a good authority. They're already selling. It's what I'm saying is, you have a population of about 200 million people.
We are far more than that.
Yeah, we could be less, really. I really believe that we are less. We are not up to 200 million. And,
did you add Niger Republic?
It's a debate for another day.
I think this is right to be.
That's a debate for another day. But you see, what I'm saying is that it's a little contribution. We need to mass produce this thing. Now the technology is available. It's for Naseni to be able to partner with industries and have investment in this. That's the point I'm making. So it becomes like a partnership between the private and the government, but also allowing private individuals who have such technology to also develop and sell. And so if we allow these things to work, then of course we will be able to actually manage the costs of this energy source. That's the point I'm making. So his ability to be able to price ourselves, look at what local inputs that can come in terms of what they call the local content, producing these panels, so that the factor of exchange rates does not necessarily impact the cost of this panel, and then they become affordable, and household can actually have them and have panel in their homes, and then of course they can be metered and sold at a very reasonable and responsible price.
Okay, when households and even businesses do have solar power panels installed, let's look at the quality of the power itself. For those who use solar energy, it seems to be a combination of different power sources. They're on the national grid, there is solar power, because there are some equipment that the solar power cannot, solar cannot power. So the quality of the power, it seems like for you to be able to power very heavy equipment or equipment that need huge power supply, you need to have invested so much. And so the solar power that you're using is the type that is very expensive to be able to actually power those kind of equipment. What's the issue?
It's not completely true. I think it's a misconception.
Okay.
For example, there's a little village in India. The airport, which is 10 times bigger than Nigeria airports in Abuja or Lagos, is completely run on solar energy. Wholesale on solar energy. So if somebody tells you that there are some equipment that solar cannot, I don't think it's completely true. You see, but what the issues really are is the fact that if you're building a system, you have to look at the capacity of the system that you are building. Now, if you have a 3 kVA solar panel, for example, it can only carry as much energy as 3 kVA. If you build a 1000 kVA solar system, then if you have equipment that are 1000, it will also be able to carry it. But what you have seen is the fact that because of the cost implication of building 10 kVA, for example, is so massive that you may not be able to afford it. So what you do is that either you build a 5 kVA or a 3 kVA that will be able to just give you either fan or just socket for bulbs. So this is what it is. But I think, and that is the point where I'm talking about the affordability of that energy, where we are actually able to build this energy in quantum that can actually power whatever operation that we are running, even at a cheaper rate than the conventional energy, as long as we are able to generate the local input from within.
Another thing we can also do is this. We are very individualistic here. I rent a flat in a block of flats. I get a solar panel. She gets a solar panel. The next neighbor gets a solar panel. Before you know, we have, let's say, 28 flats, everybody getting a solar panel. Whereas we can all come together and get a bigger solar panel that can serve everybody for half the price.
Yeah, that's very true.
But I think the issue with that, it's not really about being individualistic. It's how to measure the usage. Because when you get that kind of a panel, for instance, or power source, and everyone is tapped into it, you have people who are using and other persons feel like, oh, I'm not using as much as the other person. So issues like that are the reason why people just want to have their peace and have theirs.
It's not different from what you has said.
Yeah.
This is all born out of selfishness. And I think that's the point. When you say we are individualistic, is that we are just too selfish. And so if we are this selfish, it will be difficult for you actually to get things done. Just even in terms of borehole. In the neighborhood I lived, we came one day, we used to use public water, and everybody said, oh, we want to do borehole, we want to do borehole. And I said to them, why will all of us do borehole here? Why? We are endangering ourselves. Can't we just have one single borehole to serve the streets? Everybody contribute to it, we connect it into the already lines of water. But no. That ego will not allow people to pool resources together and actually reduce our costs. That is the real problem with the black man. You see, when you look at businesses outside, you talk about mergers and acquisition. Abby, in the West, in America, you will see a company that is making huge fortune. We wake up one day and said, okay, I want to sell this company to somebody so that I can venture into something else. But what do you see in our environment? Fragmentation. So this is a problem, and this is why cost here is somehow unbearable. When we learn to share assets and resources, it will become much more economical for everybody. I think that's the point that Chuks was trying to make.
But another part to it is this. For those who already own their houses, that kind of collaboration is possible. What if you live in a rented apartment? And so you put money together, let's say every tenant in a particular building put money together. When you're living, what happens?
I've seen, here in Lagos, I've seen rented apartments, block of flats, that have shared solar panel with inverters. You pay for what you use. Okay, so it becomes
a thing of people subscribing to it. Yeah. In that case, wouldn't it be better for companies to just have, we have the discos, for instance, when we look at the national grid, and for almost every state, or at least one disco controls maybe 2 to 3 or 4 states. So if we have in small units, Chicks even talked about that, providing for different, maybe like a street, there's a company in charge of that, or an entire area, the subscription goes above. How is that going to happen? What kind of private partnership would we need for that to come into effect on a wide scale?
Yeah, but I think, again, it's possible. But you also know that for some certain reasons, some people like the status quo to remain. And if they become very influential, especially with the circle, in the circle of the governing authorities, they can actually work against some certain policies from working. Because here is not actually, the goal is not to make light available to all. The goal is actually to make profits at maximum to some. So this is the issue, and this is what we have to all contend with. It's not a rocket science. All these things that we are talking about, they are within reach. But unfortunately, government will not run itself. It's run by people. And if people have vested interest in some certain area, you find it's difficult to actually write policies that can make it really convenient for everybody. So this is where our faith all lies. But I think from the rules that we have today, it is possible for individuals to actually begin to generate their electricity. And a lot of people are doing so already in Lagos, who invest in solar panel, and they're actually not, and there's no law that forbids you from actually putting a solar in your house.
So, Blessing said I should ask you if you can tell us the names of the some, those with invested interest.
So it's trying to set me up on the table.
Now, I think that you must be one of them.
All right, so we're talking about solar clean energy, looking at solar power generation and its potential in Nigeria. Okay, the benefits. Let's look at the benefits. How? What are the benefits that we're likely to see when we have lots of homes powered by solar power?
Yeah, like I said to you already, in the sustainability argument, there are three basic P's in this argument. The first P is the planet. The second P is the people. And the third P is profit. Now, so when we're talking about the sustainability debate, what comes to mind is the fact that, number one, we need to save this planet so that our children and our children's children will have an earth to live in. Because the way human beings had used this natural habitat, it's becoming more difficult for other people who are coming after us to find a living. And that's why we're channeling a whole lot of energy away from non-renewable sources to renewable source. That's the first P. Save the planet for the future inhabitants. Number two, people. Now you're also saying that we must have value for people. And the carbon emission which is coming out from some of these operations is actually endangering the life of the people within society, creating a whole lot of health challenges, which of course society had to deal with because of these things that are coming out. And so the word is saying, for the sake of people, you also need to be responsible in the use of the things that bring you some measure of comfort. Now, the last leg of the P, which is profit, is also to see how do we actually rely on nature so that we can save costs or use what nature has given to us without necessarily have to pay more, especially in the face of dwindling resources. So there's an economic dimension to it, there's a social dimension to it, and there's also an environmental dimension to all these things. So these benefits all will come to us if we embrace this clean energy source, which of course the world is campaigning for.
All right, investments are sometimes done for power generation to support the national grid, especially for maintenance when it goes off. So what should the government be channeling such investments now? We've talked about solar. Is it possible to do a diversion of such investments? Instead of trying to fix the national grid continuously, maintain it, since solar seems to be a more sustainable way to generate power and is even more friendly to the environment, should some of it be going into that from the government, not just leaving it to private individuals to handle?
Well, I think globally what the best practices actually at the moment is that they call it the energy basket mix. You have all four sources of energy come into one and same basket, and then of course you are able to distribute. But talking about investment, and that's the point that I have made earlier on. And in the earlier part of the show, we're talking about the news analysis on India government incentivizing the production of EV batteries. Now, what this means is that government is looking into the future and look at the massive level of investment in this direction. And government is saying, oh, there are people who are interested in doing this business. They may not have the right incentive. So what government is trying to do is to say, okay, let's incentivize these people, give them some facility at a very, very reasonable price, and then, of course, support them, maybe waivers here and there, that will reduce the cost that comes to these people. To that extent, you will see government is able to actually subsidize whatever thing that will go into that investment, because it's new technology, definitely it will be expensive. But look, I have also added another leg to that conversation a while ago, that yes, government can actually float an IPO.
Okay.
They can actually float an IPO and to say, yes, we want to build this power source, and then we are selling it. This is an amount of investment that is needed. And as long as the business is not going to be politicized, and that there are governance structures that are in place that are not based on political consideration or ethnic sentiment, but based purely on economic motive, then people will subscribe and they will put money on the ground, and this money will be working for them. A lot of Nigerians will buy, as long as this thing is generating and yielding profit or dividend on an annual basis. Now, for me, these are some of the creative ways that government can also look toward in terms of raising funds to support this emerging technology. We can also use the sovereign wealth fund while making profit from other sector. We can actually also be channeling it as an investment into a new sector, which become also another revenue earner for government. All these things are the possibility, and these are the things that every other person is doing across the globe that we must also embrace, and not always eat our seed and be expecting harvest the next season.
No, it's miracles we're expecting, sir. I want to make this suggestion. What you just said, there is a private company, I won't mention the name, that'll be free advert. Right here in this country, over 7 years, they brought these solar panels and batteries, and they advertised, and they are giving these materials out and installing. They didn't just, they give it to you, they install, and they inspect, and they monitor. And over a span of 3, 4, 5 years, you pay them back every month. Not much. And after a period of 4, 5 years, it's yours. So I'm also looking, government should be able to do something like this. The government might not even go individually, government might go through communities and say, okay, for this particular community, we are going to install 100 kVA in this community, and everybody subscribe to it and pay this amount.
Yeah, but over. You see, I think you say, I don't like when we're talking business and we're bringing government into the equation. If a private initiative can achieve that, all we just know is that people who have money can invest in that sector and see how profitable it is from those who have experienced it. So if the model is working for somebody and they are making profit, my advocacy here is that people who have fund or looking for where to invest, this is a virgin or fallow ground where they can put their investment and make so much money out of it.
A lot of rural areas in Nigeria are not yet electrified, so to speak. Electrified, I mean that do not have access to electricity. And there have been some investment in that area, but what seems to be the issue, and what kinds of initiative would make rural electrification possible in every rural area in Nigeria?
Well, I think it's just the willpower of those who have a responsibility of doing this. We've been hearing about rural electrification projects since the 1980s. Right from the day of Babangida, agencies were created to do this. You see, the real huge challenge, like I have always said, in the equation of whatever problem we are facing as a people, is the human factor. Once you take away the human factor, these other issues that they're talking about will just naturally vanish. We don't need any, what am I going to call it, a rocket science to give power to people in the rural areas. Especially even when they in the rural area are willing to pay for this power. As I speak to you in my community, a very rural community, as we speak now, we are contributing money to change the wooden pole in our community and put on the concrete pole. Last February, we had contributed money to revamp the transformer.
Which will later turn to PHM.
This is Disco's property that we are funding. And I know thousands and thousands of communities who are doing same. Who are doing same. And I think this is the real area where, of course, like I said, in the EFQM model of quality control, where the leadership factor is constituting about 15% to success in any process, really need to be effective. Disco in Nigeria in the last 5 years is a disaster. And government must not shy away from this. We must be able to tell ourselves the truth. If you buy a company of government and you inherited all the assets, and in the last 5 years you have not made significant investment in that sector, and then of course we are still allowing such impunity, so to speak, to run, I think it's an aberration. This for me is where the real critical issues lie. We even have cases where people, community, gather money to buy transformer to feed them light, and the same system will have to charge the people for installation, which is supposed to be their asset. This is unacceptable. It can't happen anywhere except in Nigeria, and this is where government need to hold some people very, very accountable. Now, when you get to the regulator and say, oh, there are avenues that when you have this, you buy transformer, they should factor this costing into your energy. The man in the street does not know how this happen. So this is the dilemma that is facing rural electrification project. It's even becoming worse now. Because you see, what Disco also has been doing in recent time is actually taking energy to people who can pay.
Exactly.
And prioritizing energy distribution to where they can make maximum profit, and without really realizing that energy is critical to life. And even the rural areas that are supposed to be feeding the urban centers need this electrification. And if this has been done effectively, there are a lot of people who have no business being in the city. All they needed to do was to remain in their village and able to create economy to support the urban center. So this is the area where government really need to focus on this thing. So if these people have no capacity to do it, since they are indigenous company, I think the current regime can actually look elsewhere for people who have demonstrated capacity, competence in the area of electricity generation and distribution to actually invest in this economy and then make their money out of it.
Okay. Thank you very much, and I want to apologize. It's not Blessing, it's Discourse. She happens to be the one directly next to you. Sir, let's look at it from this angle. The president is almost getting a contract done for the coastal roads.
Lagos to Calabar to Akwa Ibom. Now, if you see this stretch of road, the sea is next to it. The ocean is next to it. And with the ocean and the sea comes wind. Don't you see advantage, don't you see opportunity of windmills, this stretch over 1,000 kilometers from Lagos down the south-south? Windmills that can serve rural communities.
Yeah, of course, they are, like I said earlier, even in India today, really, they're also using these various energy mix. They're not taking it from one source. And I think this is what actually we should also need to do, to be able to show up, of course, their valuable energy within the society. But here again, yes, of course, it will require investment. But I don't see this as government project, really. That we should liberalize, that power can be traded. Because just like the telephone, there is no other thing that will be on demand. In short, telecom can't even compete with power if it is effectively traded. So there is so much profit in that sector. But like I said in the earlier part of the show, you see there's a whole lot of blackmail of government. And you see energy cost is high. And so because it's high, the poor people are suffering. And because poor people are suffering, you know, this government is insensitive. And government try as much as possible to carry this burden, and they are not able to carry it. Some time ago, I've advocated in this same show, India were in our shoe. Epileptic power supply. And there was a lot of huge subsidy on power to farms and to households. And this was massive, as the industry could not grow. So what did India do? They decided to remove subsidy from energy completely. Now, when the Modi government came in 8 years ago, what were in their heart was the fact that, yes, of course, you know, the business people always take advantage of the poor people to make fortune for themselves. Because you sit down in the house and say, oh, they are speaking for you poor people. They're actually not speaking for you, they are speaking for themselves. But they're also using you, the poor people, as excuse. Oh, poor people cannot afford it. Government cannot afford to be suffering the poor people. It is always a lie, because the business people are the one benefiting for whatever incentive or subsidy government is putting, because it doesn't get to the poor. And that government realized that this was what was happening. What did they do? They said, okay, we want to actually know who we are, and they did national identification. For 8 years, India invested $1 billion to give identity to their citizens, and even those who were in the rural area, they were able to cover everybody, 1.3 billion people with Indian ID card. And with that, data was available. The government could see those who were really poor. And then they have to determine to help the 300 million poor Indians and send the cost of subsidy straight to them to enable them to purchase energy. In that case, the blackmail from the business community against the Indian government ceased. And now today they are doing power trading in India. So you can decide to buy power today and keep it till next year if it is cheaper for you to buy today. And so all these things are made possible to ensure that the industry is good. And so everybody is moving into rural area. And today India is supplying power to about 3 neighboring countries because they have overcome the problem. So powering India is no longer a problem because some strategic steps were taken by the government to ensure that the real issue, which of course those who are benefiting from the rot that continue to blackmail the system, are taking up the way. And I think that's what we need to do in Nigeria.
What really could challenge having biogas powered solutions in rural areas?
I don't think there should be any challenge. The only challenge, which of course we currently face, which is what I want to always talk about, is mental laziness, our ability to sit down and think and see tomorrow today. That's the real issue we have. And if we all wake up to be able to overcome that mental laziness, and then really understand that when we have a determined heart, a lot is possible. And also looking at the benefit, of course, that will be accruing or accruable to the entire society if this is done, especially looking at the positive dimension to all these things. Some of all these things become real possible. You see, the only thing that had consistently dragged us backward, like Sam mentioned, is not the absence of policies. We have all beautiful policies everywhere, well written by the best brain. But we fail always at the doorpost of implementation. When, of course, you begin to accommodate all manners of interest. And this is where the whole issues lie, as far as I'm concerned. If you are liberalizing, liberalize completely. Don't give somebody a goat and hold the rope. Leave the rope.
So it should be free. You're talking about the power sector.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so don't give somebody a rope and a goat and you hold the rope. You are still in control. Allow people to get into business and do business. This is why FDI is not coming. This is why local people are not investing. Because the control by the public officers over these things, over the profitability of the industry, is what the real issues are. So once we can be able to transcend these limitations, and that ecosystem is created for profitability, there are so many capital that is looking for investment outside. Even from within, Nigerians are investing in other economies. So why are they not investing in our own? Because there's a structure in place that will not make those investments profitable. And I think that's where, again, we speak to the issue about leadership, where we sit down around a small table and agree on what progress we need to make on a certain thing. We were speaking 2 weeks ago in Kigali, and one of the issues that was raised was that, for example, there is no forest in Rwanda that 4G has not covered. The entire nation. Rural electrification in Rwanda, access is over 75%.
So what did they do right that we need to do?
Just willpower, that is what is right. You have a government that has a focus. When, of course, the government was laying, according to the story of Rwanda, laying the 4G network around the entire nation, in short, the people who were bringing the money were really worried. They saw it as a wasteful investment. And there were stories all the newspaper that, oh, the president was wasteful, he doesn't know what to do, who needed 4G in the village. And all of all those things were. But 2 years down the line, he could show from the data what amount of resources has come to Rwanda as a result of this effort. Because you can cite anything anywhere because there's access. You can have data. You can be in the local community doing something and you have this access. And that's why they could implement their Momo program, where, of course, transfer of money through telephoning become very easy and simple. We can do it if we'll muster the political will to do things right.
Okay, quickly let me ask, talking about doing it if we muster the will, assuming the will is there, but we understand that this off-grid solutions we've talked about today and clean energy, they're expensive. Does it have anything to do with not having the right technology to harness these natural sources? Does it contribute to it being very expensive?
That's what I said earlier on, while we're looking at the affordability of no conventional source of energy. And I said, energy as it is, for example, in the UAE today, is adequately priced. The cost of producing conventional energy and producing solar energy is at par. How did they achieve it? Transparency. Simple. So once your system becomes transparent, and then of course you add some little creativity. Yesterday I talked about value engineering in terms of supply chain management that you bring into the process to see that yes, they have the technology, but we have some raw material that can be converted. And we are going to sign up company and say, oh, this is how we want it. We want some level of technical people groom from within so that it can reduce dependence on expatriate. And then, number one, we are creating an economic ecosystem by ensuring that what is being produced, that this panel really are made here. So if they are made here and they are cheaper here, it will bring down the cost. So this is what the real issues are. We want it made and finished in China and then just assemble here. And we say we are adding value. No. The procurement system should change. So once we get the procurement right, a lot of these costs that we are talking about, we will be able to accommodate it and take it from it, and the price naturally will come down.
Okay, if everyone needs to contribute to the structure, I also think when people are building, they should have that foresight that if I need to use biogas here, I should introduce the pipe early or introduce it in my construction right from the beginning, so that at the point in time when I decide to tap into this particular source of energy, I don't need to go breaking something or seeing something messy. So you know that as you're moving into your house, it is ready to use a biogas, if it's methane you want to use, or if it's any other form of waste for your feedstock. Yeah, the same thing for solar too.
Yeah, but that's what we're talking about, strategy. National housing strategy should be able to address all those. That the people who are approving designs and drawings for housing should be able to articulate this, that if a man is going to build a house, these provisions are made and they are put on the ground. For the ones that are already built, yes, excuses can be there. But for new buildings going forward, because we're thinking about tomorrow, so you don't approve designs if those things are not there. And this is where we are failing. We're approving agencies, for example, who are supposed to be regulators, are not putting their feet on the ground to see some certain things done. You're building now, you are not thinking about people who are disabled. You're building, you are not thinking about multiple energy source. You're building, and all these things are not factored in to see adequate planning of what tomorrow is going to look like. So we must sit down and be able to articulate those policies that before people get approval to do some certain things, it will be in line with the vision that the nation has set for itself and said, this is the direction we want to go going forward, and every investment will be channeled toward that direction, and then we'll achieve a very great result at the end of the day.